Hi, this video is going to take you through the scientific method. It is a Prezi presentation, so I'm just going to go through each part and make sure you are filling in your notes page. We'll start. The scientific method is something that scientists use in order to solve problems based on questions that they've asked about the world. It involves a series of steps 5 to 9 that are used to investigate an occurrence, something that is happening in the world.
Have you noticed that Howard can take any topic and use it to remind you that he went to space?
Interesting hypothesis. Let's apply the scientific method. Perform an experiment.
Okay. Hey, Howard, any thoughts on where we should get dinner?
Anywhere but the space station. I mean, on a good day, dinner was a bag full of meatloaf. But hey, you don't go there for the food, you go there for the view.
Fascinating. Let me see if I can duplicate the result. Howard, I've always thought the lemon was an underrated fruit. Care to weigh in?
Not really.
Oh, well.
You know, people say the Soyuz capsule is a lemon, but... Yeah, but hey, that baby got me to space and back.
Alright, and let's talk about the first step in the scientific method. We can't do anything or investigate any kind of thing that's going on in our world around us without asking a question first. So in this step, you have to ask or develop a question that can be answered by an experiment. For example, here's a question: how long can a tomato plant grow in 2 weeks? So once we ask that question, we can set up an experiment to test it. So we would grow a tomato plant for 2 weeks and measure it daily and come up with a result. Step number 2, we have to do some background research. We do this because we want to gain enough knowledge to be able to set up a good experiment, an experiment that is testable, something we can measure, and it helps us get our most accurate results. So in this step, we would make observations and maybe we would research our topic of interest. So our background information in our experiment would be about how tall tomato plants usually do grow in 2 weeks. So we can use findings of scientists from the past in other experiments to get some information about our experiment that we're going to do. Step number 3 is the hypothesis. And a hypothesis, I know that's a really big word, but a hypothesis is an educated guess. And that's all it is. So if we have a question about something, then we might come up with a hypothesis, which we would guess, like how tall do we think plants will grow in 2 weeks? And we could say, I think a tomato plant will grow half a meter in 2 weeks.
In order for scientists to find the answer to a question, they need to construct a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a way that you can test what the answer to a question is about the natural world. And so my example of a hypothesis is going to be, if I feed my plant energy drink, it will grow faster. If I feed my plant energy drink, it will grow faster. This example hypothesis is pretty good because it meets a lot of the objectives that all hypotheses need to meet. First of all, it's logical. Because if I drink an energy drink, I get a lot of energy. And so maybe if a plant has an energy drink, it will get a lot of energy and grow. So it's logical. It accounts for relevant information. Accounting for relevant information is basically checking all of the information that's already out there about your experiment and making sure that no one has already done the same experiment that you're about to try. So you need to account for relevant information. Your hypothesis needs to be testable. In this case, our hypothesis is testable because we can get some energy drink and we can give it to our plant and see if it grows faster. So this one is pretty testable. And then finally, your hypothesis needs to be the simplest form of the question that you can possibly think of. And our example here, if I feed my plant energy drink, it will grow faster. That's about as simple as it can possibly get. And so this is how you would construct a hypothesis and a few guidelines that you would need to follow when you're doing it.
All right. Step number 4, once we've come up with a question, we've researched it, and then we've created a hypothesis, which is an educated guess about what we think the results of the experiment would be. We would test our hypothesis by actually doing an experiment. So we want to check if the hypothesis is correct by doing the experiment. So our example would be we would put a tomato plant in a pot and measure it daily. Now your procedure has a lot more steps to that, but that just gives you an idea of how we would actually do the experiment for that hypothesis. Alright, once we've done the experiment, we need to collect our data. During the experiment, you would be collecting data by measuring your plant every day, and you would then chart your data and put it into a graph, analyze it, and then come up with some sort of conclusion. So we would examine our main points, check if our answer is correct, and draw a conclusion. For example, with our tomato plant, we would write down how many inches per week the tomato plant grew, and then we would graph our data and analyze our results. And in step number 6, we would report the results and ask ourselves, was our hypothesis correct? So you have to look at your results and tell whether or not your hypothesis was correct or incorrect. So our hypothesis was that the tomato plant would grow 4 inches in 2 weeks. And we could say, once we did this experiment and looked at our data, that yes, the hypothesis was correct. The tomato plant grew 4 inches in 2 weeks. Alright, so let's review. Here are the steps of a scientific method. First, ask a question. So you would observe something that you would want to know more about and come up with a question. You would then do some background research on that topic. Maybe some more observation. We could research using books, internet, magazines, newspapers, and other people to find information. Once we've gathered a lot of information, we can construct a hypothesis about what we think would be the result. So it's just an educated guess. We can write down our hypothesis to compare it later to see if we were correct. We're then going to test our hypothesis to see if we were correct by doing an experiment. So you do the experiment, observe what's happening during the experiment, and we would write down our observations. Once we wrote down our observations, we would analyze that data and draw a conclusion about what happened. We use graphs to show our actual results, and then we can compare our results to our hypothesis. And report our results. Was our hypothesis correct? Determine if your hypothesis was correct, and maybe come up with an explanation why it was right or wrong. And it doesn't matter if your hypothesis was wrong. You were just taking a guess, well, an educated guess anyways, and you do the experiment to see if it's correct. In your experiment, is what determines whether you are correct or not. You don't have to try to fit your experiment to make your hypothesis correct. It is okay for your hypothesis to be wrong. Alright, and that's it for the Prezi. You can certainly go back into the video and get anything that you missed with your notes. If you have any questions,